I think we are good to go. So this will go out Easter Monday. So happy Easter.
Okay. Happy Easter to you, darling.
Is the first thing to say. And Kay, thank you so much. I have read your new book. It's in the studio, and it is absolutely stunning. Two things, I guess, first of all, is that the very first thing that you say in it is that you would invite everyone to your studio, but you couldn't possibly.
Yes.
When you wrote it, we didn't live in this world.
Yeah, that's true.
And now you certainly can't invite everyone there. So
no, that's true.
Perfect timing.
Yeah.
There is a whole section on your everyday life, but just quickly, for the last year, how has everyday life changed for you?
Well, it's very strange because it's like I am like a hermit, who lives, in this old tower in the middle of the country, it's, away from everybody because I'm always working on my projects. And then I break off and fly all over the world and give workshops and talk to thousands of people. And then I come home and I'm a hermit again. So it's not changed. I mean, the hermit part goes on. I've got all my toys here. I play with my fabulous colors and make things, and I have a wonderful time. What I miss terribly, what's really different, is going to the coffee shop at the end of the day with my crossword puzzle, new from the newspaper, and sit down and do the crossword puzzle and drink my chai. And so I can't do that anymore.
So do you not get the newspaper, no chai?
Oh, no, I get the newspaper and I do the puzzle, but I have to do it in my back in my own space.
And does someone else make you the chai?
No, I go and, well, sometimes I can go and buy it to take away,
So you still get that walk. Because what struck me, I mean, I've read a lot of your books now, and it did strike me this morning that actually, since having children, I rarely get the chance to read a book. But I always make an exception for yours, because I'm captivated all through. And always exercise plays a massive part, whether it's being a whirling dervish, whether it's training as a dancer, whether it's your Pilates lessons 2 times a week, whether it's open air swimming like a madman at silly o'clock in the morning on Hampstead. It's always there. So what have you managed to keep going for the last year?
The Pilates classes, which are so important, because what I find, I'm very bad at motivating myself to do push-ups or stomach crunches or any of those things. Or, I mean, I used to go to the gym and that was my excuse. I would sit, work on the rowing machine or something, to get the body moving. And I find I'm very unmotivated to do that myself. But I have a wonderful Pilates teacher, and she just puts me through my paces. Some of the stuff I can't do at this great age anymore, but I just, I do as much as I can, and it feels wonderful.
So keeping moving, because you're still designing fabrics, knitwear, all sorts of different things. And when you knit, it's fair to say you have a low Afghanistani chair.
Yes. It used to be an Afghanistani chair that kind of wore out and that got tossed. But I have a low chair.
And is that really important then, the level that you sit at to knit? I don't knit, so I don't know. It seems
to. It's funny. I wonder why. I think it's because I put my yarn on the floor and then I'm closer to it. I can just the colors I want.
But not quite on the floor, so you don't get stuck on the floor. But
exactly.
Yeah. But before that, it used to be that you sat on your bed and you knitted on your bed. And
that's right. Yeah, that's right. Cross-legged cross-legged on my bed, knitting away.
I mean, that's quite a student type existence, isn't it? To just,
Yeah.
I mean, I just used to do everything on my bed when I was a student, everything, you know, my homework, painting, everything, all used to happen there.
Yeah.
And that changed
Yeah.
about 1990.
Right.
Yeah. So should we go through your hazard? Because you are now, you have your studio, it is your home. But it took you a while to build up to the whole studio. When you first came to London in the 60s, you lived in Notting Hill and you had a little flat there.
Mm-hmm.
But the house that you're in now, you actually found as a flat for a friend.
That's right. Yeah. It's funny because I was quite happy in Notting Hill, but you know, this friend of mine desperately needed a place. She was a very creative woman. She had an autistic son. Didn't realize he was autistic at that point, but she needed a place to create and to make a life here in England. She was American from New York, and so you know, I just went out, you know, the way you do for a friend, and just found a place, you know. And it was very inexpensive. I think you had to pay about £400 key money to get this flat, and it was just one flat. And she moved in, and she had it, and then she got married, and she said, "I'm going to give up the flat. Do you want it?" And I said, "Definitely." And so I grabbed it, and then I was able to buy the rest of the house as I was able to afford it.
I mean, that didn't happen overnight, did it? And when you first moved in, there were certain carpets and chairs that went. I can't believe you got rid of it.
Yes. Swirls of vomit carpets. You know, it was.
I have those 1950s swirls of vomit.
Yeah. Just horrendous. And there was no like conventional furniture. They had 2 car seats, you know, from like a sports car. I mean, they were actually quite nice. They were red leather, but they were, you know, big metal kind of chairs that sat there covered with leather. And anyway, I sold those, and I sold the carpet.
I mean, they might have been a great height for knitting. I'm just throwing it out there if you missed a trick.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. They could have been very nice.
But then your furnishings, because it must be one of the things that people always ask. You know, you are renowned for your color. You are renowned for your needlepoint, for furnishings, your quilts, for all of these things that make our houses homes. So I guess one of the first questions that people ask is, well, what is your home like?
Yes.
And it used to have a lot of sawdust on the floor. Okay.
That's true. Because I didn't have central heating. You know, the idea of having central heating in those days was just anathema, because I didn't have the money for those kind of, you know, fancy things. So anyway,
these newfangled boilers.
Collect wood as I would walk up the street. There was always somebody throwing out an old chair or something, and I would bring it home, stack it up in my hallway, and then I had a little table and a saw, and I would saw these things up and put it in the fire to burn for my heat.
I mean, this is the dream, right? It's so wondrously rustic, and so not what anyone would probably expect from someone living in central London.
No.
Just so funny. And then if you had guests who got a little bit chilly,
that's right.
Just
you really have done your homework. Yeah, I think that they would say to me, "Oh, I'm so cold. Aren't you cold?" And I say, "You know what? Let's get some more wood for the fire. You just go and saw some wood." And by the time they'd end up sawing the wood, they were warm. Which is what I discovered. You know, a little activity makes us, you know, our blood starts flowing and we get warm.
Absolutely. I mean, you are not afraid of the cold, as a man who for 10 years swam every morning open air. Now that was with an amazing woman who you did a lot of TV with.
That's right. And James. Yeah. I mean, she did this wonderful series with me called Glorious Color, which we which we put out on Channel 4. And, she was marvelous working with her, because she just had this kind of uh, very studious way of studying what my life was like, and making all these notes and things, and then making these beautiful films. Beautiful. They had a lovely slow development, and a lovely atmosphere. I mean, she made me look amazing. And she did, one on painting and one on needlepoint and one on knitting and so forth. And they were just beautiful. But what was interesting is one day she called me up and she said, "I think it's time you went swimming, and I am going to take you." And this was in the middle of summer. And so we
Okay.
started. And then it got, further and further into the year, and it was getting colder and colder. And I said to a Russian guy that used to swim there, I said, "I'm afraid to go into the winter. I couldn't swim in the cold." And he said, "You've gone this far. You can go. You can swim in the winter. Come with me." And so, every day, we would go, and finally it got iced over, and they would break the ice with an oar, and we would jump into this little bit, hearing the clinking ice cubes, around us. And, you just jumped in and out quickly. But it just made you so fresh, and your blood was flowing. And I never had a cold for like 15 years of working, doing that cold water swimming. I never had a cold.
Hey, maybe that's the key right now. Maybe you need to
Yeah,
go dip your toe again on
yeah, yeah.
because I hear there's something
But
else
it's
going
all
on.
the rage now. Everyone's talking about cold water swimming.
They
In
are,
those
you're
days,
right.
people would say, they would just be freaked out that I did it, and they would say, it's all the people in the park would say, "It's very dangerous. You people shouldn't be there." And I would look at these people, who were like 108 and still swimming, and they were fabulous, and I thought, they're motivated and they're still alive. Come on, it must be something good here.
Absolutely, absolutely. Are you not tempted to go back to it?
I am very tempted to go back to it. We just bought some tickets to. You have to do it times now, and you have to go at a certain time slot. But I'm going to go back. Yeah.
Amazing, amazing. Oh, that's fabulous news. So your book, um, it's a lovely step by step through your home, which you eventually got
Yeah,
to buy as the complete 3.5 floors.
that's right.
But the ability to first buy it, well, they tried to evict you first, didn't they? Because you had filing
Yes,
cabinets.
that's right.
Is that an evictable offense? Because I've got filing cabinets. I mean, that's like just tidying up, isn't it?
Yeah, they said he must be running a business because he's got filing cabinets. The fact that I had 50,000, cones of yarn all over the place,
Not a problem.
that didn't.
No.
Yeah, no problem. They couldn't see that. Extraordinary.
So what did the judge say?
Well, they miswrote their proposal when they said, "We're evicting Mr. Fassett because blah blah blah," and they put the wrong English. So the sentence wasn't proper English, and the judge said, "I can't accept this because it's not proper English," and they said, "Oh, please, Your Honor, can't you make an exception?" And he said, "My dear man, this is a court of law. You pay Mr. Fassett's expenses and go home. Get out of here." And fabulous. I mean, I walked out, I had my flat, and I had it for the rest of time because they couldn't now evict me. And I could have passed it on to my children if I had any.
It's almost worth having some just to pass it.
I know, exactly. Just
Just to
so
be
anyway,
crazy about it.
and that was lovely. And so then I was able to buy the building. I got it together and bought the whole building, which is great.
So from the outside, it looks like every other home on the street. And then you walk up the path and you get to the porch. And the porch is the very first hint that there's something magical inside. One side is an amazing mosaic of hollyhocks. And then the other, so my question is, because the other, my overwhelming memory of the other one is that there is actually a teacup with the finger.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah,
So
with a handle.
and
Yes.
how many people do you find when they're waiting for you to answer the door, just with their
Well,
finger stuck through the handle?
postmen, men would, wow, how did you make this? This is amazing. And they would have, their finger in the handle of the teacup as I would open the door. That was fascinating because, a guy could see that, that was like tile laying, but it was big chunky pieces. And Brandon did that side of it.
Was going to be my next question. Did you have a side each?
Yeah, that's right. And his was abstract, big, strong diamonds in shades of color. It's just absolutely wonderful, very much like a patchwork. And then my side was hollyhocks, which my ode to the English. That's one of the most wonderful English garden plants I've ever come across, because it's so operatic and theatrical and huge, and these great towers of flowers. Absolutely wonderful.
So that is the first hint. And the next thing is, you ring the doorbell. And there's stained glass in the front door.
Yeah.
But it's not normal. It starts off in a nice ordered check.
Yeah. Yeah.
Then tumbles down. It's phenomenal. Yeah. I love it.
Yeah.
And again, this is something that you and Brandon designed together.
Yeah. Yeah. And I had a friend who was he was a fabulous Irish singer, but he also made stained glass. And I said to him, you see, I want you to do the top just the way it was, this kind of Victorian stained glass window. But then I want it to disintegrate and tumble down as if it's just fallen to pieces and falling down. And he did it absolutely beautifully.
Yeah, it is. It's really stunning. And there are so many treats for the eye. Just in those first 30 seconds of arriving at the door, you could stay there half an hour and just drink it all in. It's just wonderful. And then the door is opened and you step in, and there's the most incredible wallpaper, and the eye is led down your hallway to the end. And when I came, there was your chair at the end. Now, was this a commission piece? Because it's covered in vegetables, needlepoint vegetables, and took 3 months to make?
Yeah. It was 3, sometimes 4. According to who was in the studio at that time. But it was commissioned by Steve Lovey, the great photographer who did my first 4 books. But then he decided to move back to America, and he didn't really want the chair. So that was fine. We had this fabulous chair, which we've put into many museum shows around the world, and it has been the star of the show. So it's a great showpiece.
It's just phenomenal. And the wallpaper was given to you by your friend?
Yeah. I had this wonderful friend, Karen Beecham, who worked in a wallpaper factory, and she was, designing and making these fabulous wallpapers, and they came in panels. And this was a wonderful old Sanderson's design of a kind of oriental garden, and it was just marvelous. So that was lovely. She donated that to us for a credit in the book.
Amazing. Absolutely incredible. And that's not the only place, is it, that you've got some of Karen's wallpaper designs, Sanderson designs?
That's right.
Now, your dining room.
Yeah.
So as you go around, you don't go down a flight of stairs. It's on that level, isn't it? I'm just trying to think.
Yeah. Same level.
Yeah, that's same level. So it's kind of at the front of the house as you would go around.
Yeah.
The wallpaper in there could just have been one color,
That's right.
but
But I had 3 different colorways.
yeah,
So
of course.
there was like a sort of black and white version, and then there was like a sepia version, and then there was a colorful version,
Of
all
Kew Garden.
autumn colors. And it was Kew Gardens. So it's fabulous trees and gardens and Chinese pagodas and so forth. And so all of that I was able to, we got this guy to very carefully with a pair of little nail scissors cut out all the trees of one colorway and superimpose it on the next colorway. So we did layers of
It's
these
incredible.
things instead of having, usually you would just have a frieze of trees and then you would have beige sky going forever, not scaring the horses. Well, I wanted to scare the horses. I wanted a tapestry on the wall, So we had layers and layers of these wallpapers coming down. It was marvelous.
But the colors they're rich, but they're not vivid.
Yeah.
So it is the overall effect is incredibly sophisticated and actually restful. It's because you feel like you're outside.
Yeah. I feel that too.
Yeah. And
good. And that's exactly the feeling I wanted. And then when I went to an auction and found this amazing carpet, which we put on the floor, and then I found a wonderful tapestry that we put on the table. So it was like the walls were coming onto the table. So we had this wonderful old medieval tapestry that was machine made, but
it's all
leaves,
isn't it? It's all that feeling of leaves and nature. And then when I was there, you also had quite a lot of Christmas decorations in there. As you do. And I mean, not little discreet ones, Kaffe, it would be fair to say. Would you like to explain where they came from? Right.
Well, what happened is I was given this fabulous commission to do a 25-foot tree decoration in the Victorian Albert Museum in the foyer to the museum. And so that was very exciting. And we decided, well, if we're going to do the tree, which I was going to cover with fans of my fabric, which we put onto card and then folded like fans. So they were just beautiful. And they were these wonderful stripes, like the stripes behind me.
Yeah.
And so that was wonderful to have all these striped fabrics on these fans. And then we decided to explode the whole idea around the foyer of the whole atrium of the entrance to the V&A. And so we made these huge bowers of silk flowers and fruit and things like that, to be, festival. One of the things I find about Christmas, and when I'm often asked to do Christmas trees or Christmas decorations, and I always go for high color. I can't see the point in doing something in beige and silver and black, which people do for Christmas.
And it is stunning, and in your dining room. So I know when hosting is a thing, that would be, a candlelit dinner in there would be the thing. Is it only for high days and holidays?
Oh yes. Otherwise it's a storeroom, like it's on the ground floor. So, you get a huge shipment from Coach, let's say, of handbags and things. They all go into the dining room. Or, an exhibition comes back from a museum, all these quilts and knitting and everything else always get stuffed into the dining room. And so it's a big job to clear it out if we're actually going to have a dinner party.
So a cozy kitchen supper is generally the way, right?
I can't remember what a dinner party is anymore.
Don't know.
What a concept, huh?
I know. We were saying that yesterday. Like the idea of actually going out to eat somewhere is I don't know. So when everything lands and it gets shoved in there, door shut, let's not think about that for a while. But at some point that does have to come out, and it does have to be dissipated throughout the home. Who gets that job?
Well, there's Bundle and there's Brandon, and the two of them work very hard. I'm sitting upstairs creating the next knit collection or working on my, writing the next book or whatever.
So basically, if your name
And they're
begins with
scurrying
B,
around trying to make order and trying to keep the archive alive, Boy, it's a lot of work.
it is a lot of work, and you do keep fabric, you do keep an amount of fabric from every fabric that you create, and
Yeah.
that is all archived.
That's right.
Do you ever have a rummage and are you ever surprised and go, oh no, I forgot I did that? Oh, that's quite nice. Yeah.
Oh, darling, I'll tell you the surprise. Brandon said, let's clean out we have one little storeroom, an actual storeroom that was meant to be. And he said, let's clear out. There's buckets and buckets and buckets of old swatches of knitting yarns, where I would try out different colors or try out a new pattern. And I'd have these little swatches that I would make. And he said, just see what you can get rid of in these. Well, I started going through them and I said, oh, they're fabulous. I didn't remember doing this big coat and this big shawl and this little waistcoat. And anyway, I pulled out all these things and I realized they would make incredible tapestries if I could sew them together to make patchworks of knitting samples. And so I did. And that for about, I don't know, 3 months, 4 months, 5 months of this incredible prisoner lockdown year, I was able to make these huge tapestries. I've never had so much fun. And I think they're more beautiful than my fabric patchworks. I really, really love them because it's all of that research of trying a different pattern in different scales, different color schemes, and then how all this geometry and imagery comes together as a patchwork.
So what I notice about every different art form that you have is, and because you write about the process in your book brilliantly, but it always comes back to, and then I hang it on the wall in the studio.
Yes,
and
very important.
did you know, just a little fun fact, did you know that you have sold more of your studio wall fabric than any other of your fabrics? Did you know?
Yes, I know. My best-selling fabric is a gray grid.
The irony was not lost on me, and I did have a little giggle to myself. But it's a great concept, and it is something that I've seen you use hugely.
Yeah.
What does hanging these things on your fleece wall allow you to do?
Well, what it does, when I first started designing, I wanted to get like a little distance on things and see if a whole, you can take 4 or 5 fabrics and put them together and you kind of know that they're going to work. But to put 25 colors together, 25 different fabrics and have them work, you have to put some distance on that to see the whole picture of the whole quilt. And so what I would do is fold up fabrics in little squares and then stand on a bed, put them on the floor and stand on a bed looking down to try to get a distance. And it was very unsatisfactory. When those quilts were sewn together, invariably there were 2 or 3 elements that had to come out. So you'd have to take the whole quilt apart, take those fabrics out and sew in different ones. And so I thought there must be a better way. And then in those days, there was like a little white work wall that people would have, very, very stark white. And you would put a few pieces on it, and they were always very small. I thought we need something big, covers a whole wall, and it has to be a neutral color so that every color you put onto it kind of looks all right. It doesn't look shockingly contrasting with this horrible snow white. And so I dreamt this up. It took 5 years to convince my company to do it. They said, people going to be interested in a piece of gray flannel? And I said, yes, because the fabric, you cut out a patchwork piece of fabric and it sticks to this, and you can arrange a whole quilt on a wall and stand back and get distance on it. I said, it will be very, oh, we don't believe that this would really be a goer. So finally, after 5 years, they decide, okay, we'll go with it. We'll do it. We'll put a grid. We'll do it in this neutral color. They put it out. It was a massive seller for them. And the next year they dropped it because they said, okay, that's out of style now. I said, what do you mean out of style? It's a notion. I said, it's a tool. I said,
scissors, they're so last year, Kaffe.
Exactly. And so they brought it back. And as you say, it's the biggest seller of all our fabrics, because when we do a workshop, 30 people will buy a work wall in order to have the best possible tool to show their work off.
Yeah, I mean, we sell it by the meter so that people can decide how big they want it to be. I mean, that makes the most sense to me. And it is, I absolutely agree with you completely. Getting that distance, getting that perspective is fantastic. And you do it with everything. And so I'm skipping ahead really, but each year you commit to doing 2 different fabric collections. But also 2 knitwear collections as well for the Peruvian, is it Peruvian? Yes. Yeah.
Peruvian connection.
Yes, that's it. I was thinking collection. No, that's right, connection, which is utterly stunning. So each year you have a certain commitment. So there's 2 fabric ranges, 2 knitwear ranges. Obviously, your interviews with me. In the diary.
Put that in the schedule.
And then your meeting with Philip Jacobs, where he brings you your fabrics as well. We'll talk about that as well. What else is in that diary that is fixed? Oh, and your week on a health farm with your sister.
That's right. That's right. Which had to be canceled last year.
First time in 11 years. That's not fair.
I know, and it's canceled this year too. We've got it set for next year.
Okay.
We'll do it next year. Yeah.
And what is so important about that week?
Oh God. Well, I break off totally from the studio and I go to California, and then we go down to Mexico to this wonderful hill farm. It's got wonderful mountains around it. So it's in this little valley. And so every morning you get up at like 5:30 or 6 o'clock in the morning, and you go out hiking on a trail and take this like 5-mile hike up the mountain. And often there'll be mist coming up the valley, and it's just beautiful. And it's, very rough and marvelous. And then you come back down and you have an organic breakfast. Everything is grown on the farm. So it'll be beetroots and corn and tortillas and wonderful Mexican food, but all done organic, vegetarian, and it is so gorgeous and so good for you. And anyway, after that, then we go to yoga classes and Pilates classes and swimming in the pool and just writing in our diaries and reading our books. We were both avid readers, my sister and I. She started going, and she's the one that got me into it. And she and I have the most in common in our family. There's 5 of us kids in the family, but she and I have the real connection. And we just believe in good food and exercise and keeping ourselves fit, and so
it's working. It's working.
It's a perfect place for us. It's heaven.
And then in the evening, you will meet other people at dinner, and do they tend to be diverse, or are they like-minded? How? Oh,
totally. You meet somebody and you think, oh, here's a sort of ordinary couple. There is no such thing. Everybody we have met there has a story that is just unbelievable. There was one woman I met who was an incredible businesswoman, and she was just she was very tickety-boo, and everything, she dressed wonderfully and everything. But her business was creating houses for people with low income housing,
Yeah.
and doing it beautifully. And she said, you know what? You don't need to make a massive profit. I make enough profit to keep the business ticking over, and I'm able to help all these people. Well, that is wonderful. I mean, to me, that's the most brilliant thing, because it's what we don't have enough of in the world. It seems
Yeah.
like whenever you give the project of housing to people, it gets more and more and more expensive and high tech and everything else, and out of bounds for people who need it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I just love it that this woman just was dedicated to that. And, so those kind of things, I mean, just wonderful people. And then after the dinner, you go to a lecture given by a
Oh, wow.
wonderful doctor or a philosopher who comes down and just does it for having a free time. You can bring whatever guests you want and so they can enjoy all the facilities of the place. And then you get this wonderful mind of some brilliant, author or something who comes and gives us a talk on something uplifting.
So mind, body, and spirit all catered for in one place.
Absolutely.
Perfect.
Absolutely. Yeah.
It's interesting you say about this lady and the housing, because it struck me, this is your philosophy with things as well. You are such a giver of knowledge, of your sharer of your love of fabric. And when you did the V&A exhibition,
Yeah.
there was a little bit of backlash because it had also been commercial. You had sold your books and you'd sold your patterns.
Yeah.
And it, almost like, well, that's not a very British thing to do. But actually, what you did was enable people to, instead of buy a £2,000 one-off knitted jumper,
Yeah. Yeah.
they could create it themselves.
That's right. Here's the recipe. Here's my secrets. Here's how I did it. And here's the materials that I use. Go off and make your own. Don't complain about my prices. Because one of the things that I found about pricing, if you price things too low, people don't appreciate it. And so what you're doing is you're not making much money. You're not able to afford materials for the next project. You're just limping along, and people don't appreciate you. But if you put the price high enough, then people are very impressed.
But it's about
And they value it.
Know your worth, isn't it? Know
Yes.
your worth. And I don't think that's a very British thing necessarily that we're very good at.
Yeah.
It's no, I couldn't possibly. Actually, yeah, you can. You really can. And I think that your can-do attitude has got you into more places, doing more exciting things. And I kind of have the feeling, and correct me if I'm wrong, that even if an opportunity was offered to you and you didn't know how to do it, you would soon find out how to do it so you could do it.
Yeah. I mean, I am curious in that way. If I can, there's a lot of things I can't do, and or that I just don't have the patience, that just don't have the character to, like, for instance, take a car apart and put it together. It's like, a lot of people would say to me, you should learn how to drive. I don't even know how to drive properly. I don't have a license and I don't drive. But I know people who do.
Well, that's just it. That's all you need.
I
Right?
surround myself
Everybody does.
if I need a ride, I find a way of doing it. But
Yeah.
But one of the things about that thing of, I think it was a very fortuitous thing that I came to England, because I love so much of what is represented here, and the strength of the English and the aesthetic and the humor, the wonderful humor. But I like that. But I am in the eyes of many British people, I'm a very pushy, strong person. If I say we're going to do this thing, we're going to do it. And And I'm not shy about saying I have the talent to do this project. I know there's a lot of things I can't do, but boy, there are certain things I know I can do, and I can do it with style and with panache, and I'm going to do it, and I'm not going to be afraid to say that. So I think that that combination of that kind of ambition, but learning from the English about being a little bit more laid back and more less ambitious and less greedy and grasping. I mean, I don't need a lot. I've learned what I need, and it's quite a low threshold. You know, I get enough to buy my materials for the next projects, and I'm happy. And you know, food on the table, and my, you know, I was able to buy this house at quite a knockdown price. And so those things are important. You get all those ducks in a row,
Yeah.
and then you can create, and you not to worry.
It's getting those base comforts, isn't it? You know, once
Yes,
those are sorted and you've got the roof over your head, the food on the table,
that's
and the
right.
materials you need, and off you go.
Whereas, you know, there was a period where I was in total anxiety all the time. You know, was I going to be able to get to the next month? You know, of paying my rent and so forth. So, you know, you just, and also, you know, the whole idea about an artist supporting himself is, in my day, that was quite unusual. I mean, you know, people said, you know, you got to be a doctor or a lawyer or, you know, a dentist or something. You got to do something where, you know, you're doing a professional
Yeah.
thing where you're going to be definitely, or run a restaurant, you know, which is
Yeah.
what my father did. But, and so the idea that you could actually support yourself from something creative and playful and therapeutic was unheard of.
Well, there's a couple of things then that I'd like to touch on by that, because firstly, when you were painting and that was solely your bread and butter,
Yeah,
and the stress of that, because like you say, if you didn't sell that painting a month, that was kind of what you aimed for, a painting a
yeah,
month, and
that's right.
that would then pay your rent and put food on the table. Okay.
Yeah,
But actually, that kind of wasn't where your heart was. I think you thought it was,
yeah.
but there was an anxiety about being in the studio and painting.
Yes, yes. Because when I, you know, my art school course was a 4-year course, and I lasted 6 months and then I ran away, you know. So I was always feeling inadequate, that I was going to get caught out, that I hadn't put in the education and the work, you know. And so I was always nervous about painting. I, you know, when I look back now, I realize I can draw and I can paint fine. Just relax and enjoy it. And the more you do it, the better you get at it. But
I'm giggling because if it's taken you until your 80s to realize that, you know, you're okay at painting,
yes,
you know, something I can do, right?
exactly. Yeah.
At least
I
you
know.
realize it at some point.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, you see, as I was growing up, um, I as a representational painter, I was a stodgy, old-fashioned person. You know, "Oh, what are you doing? Still painting teacups? You know, for God's sakes!" You know, because I was up against not only Andy Warhol, who at least was doing faces and
Yeah,
things.
but the same
So
one, just in different
yeah,
colors.
yeah, same one. You know, lots of copies, but also, you know, de Kooning and Franz Klein. I mean, these were big abstract expressionists, you know, and you know, the drippy man with the Pollock, you know, throwing buckets of paint at the, you know, that's what art was going into. And if you
Yeah.
weren't doing that, you know, who were you? You know, what, you weren't edgy enough.
Yeah.
And so I was always very self-conscious about painting a room or a person or a table full of beautiful china. And I loved those things. I loved painting a still life with a beautiful paisley cloth and lovely English china with roses on it and things. You know, I wanted all that beauty. But you see, I was able, when I discovered textiles, I was able to bring those images into my textiles and recreate the romance of those fabrics that I was able to find in Portobello Flea Market, I was able to bring those back to life by creating those kind of patterns that I loved when I would come across them.
And you do that so beautifully. So for those that don't know, you move from painting into knitting.
Yeah.
And as a, you know, what are you, 6'4", 6'4"?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
lovely,
Yeah.
lovely. I can wear heels around you. It's very lovely. And a man who, big Californian guy who knits.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
But there was an anxiety that was removed
Yeah.
from the studio paintwork
Yeah.
to, well, hang on, I'm just going to knit, and it's quite
Yeah.
lovely, and look,
Yeah.
wow, this
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
amazing.
I mean, what I realized was that on days when I was working on a painting and I should go to my studio, because I had a studio up the street for a while. I start cleaning the house. Well, from Kaffe Fassett to be cleaning a house is something desperately wrong in this picture. What is going on? Because I was avoiding going to the studio to go
Hang on,
on with
I have a quote here about your where is it? Being a casual sort about tidiness
yes,
is
that's
how
very
you
good.
have described yourself, Kate.
Yeah, I'm extremely tolerant about my own mess. But I mean, one of the things is, as somebody once said in my life, I'll bet you know where everything is. I mean, it's chaos. It's definitely stacks of stuff and everything else, but I kind of know where things are. And when people tidy up for me, I can't find anything. So that's just one problem. But the thing is, what I found is that when I got into textiles, I every morning I was bouncing out of bed to get going on that next, knitted shawl or some great coat I was making or some big needlepoint tapestry that I was creating. I couldn't wait to get going on it and to keep working on it. And there was never a point where I got sick of it or it got tedious, which painting often did get tedious for me. I
So
didn't want to finish up my paintings.
yeah, I feel that. And you first discovered your love of yarn with Bill Gibb on a trip to a mill in Scotland, and the beautiful tones that a man out the back was mixing and
Yeah.
creating.
Yeah.
And there you are going, well, hang on, why are people knitting beige when there are these colors?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and and so obviously the whole Rowan yarn thing happened for you, and working with Mazzoni and all of these incredible things, and having a front cover of your knitwear on Vogue, and all of this incredible journey that you've had with knitwear. And now, what is it that draws you to the Peruvian yarn that you now work with?
It's very simple. They
Okay.
are fabulous knitters. And I can knit something with 27 colors in it and give it to them full of pattern and complexity. They don't bat an eyelid. They sit down and they knit it the way I designed it. And that's unusual because what I found is I couldn't find knitters in this country. I would have had a huge industry of making fabulous knitwear and getting it reproduced if I could have found the knitters, but they all just threw up their hands when they were, oh my goodness, 18 colors a row. I couldn't possibly do that. And I was working with like 25 colors a row on a shawl or something,
Yeah.
and no problem. But it threw people for a loop.
But you did find one.
But yeah, I found one, this wonderful
So
woman who wasn't throwing.
Zoe Hunt
Zoe,
arrives at your door.
my hunt for a great knitter was answered. Yeah, she came to my studio. She said, I want to learn about what you're doing. There's something about the way you're working that I would like to find out how you run things. Can I come and just, witness how you're operating? And I said, fine. And she said, I'll knit something for you. And I said, fine. I said, here's a sweater. I'd like it reproduced. Now, here's my collection of yarn, which was these huge drawers full of colors. And she sat down for a whole afternoon and matched colors because there was just little bits of yarn left over and things that she had to really, really work to find enough colors. And she went home and she knitted this thing. And she said, when she came back, she said to me, before I show it to you, I have to tell you, I couldn't find all the colors that you used in your piece. And I said, well, if I can't tell, then you're okay. Anyway, so she brought out 2 sweaters and laid them down. I couldn't tell which one was mine.
Wow.
They were so fabulously knit. I mean, she did a brilliant job of reproducing what I had done. And I said, I can't see where you've changed things, so you're fine. I said, you're hired. And she and I worked together for years. And she was fabulous because she was also a very neat, precise knitter. She could do wonderful patterns, and she would figure out how. I would say, I want something with wonderful ragamuffin sleeves, and I want little peplum jacket, blah, blah, blah. She worked it out. She worked it all out and did
So
it.
you had the color vision, and she
Yeah.
worked to then create it into that pattern that other people
She
could then
was a
reproduce.
technician who
Yeah.
was able to put that together. And also she knitted so fast that it was unbelievable. I mean, she and I were just like demons. We would get on the needles. And sometimes when people were filming us, they couldn't even see what we were doing because we were working so fast. We had to slow everything down to show people how on film.
But yours is a knit one, purl one. I mean, it's
Yeah, that's right. I kept the technique, the all over technique, very, very simple, just stocking stitch.
Yeah.
But putting in lots of color and pattern, and doing Fair Isle and Intarsia, and wonderful use of color, and of course finding these fabulous yarns here that people were ignoring while they knitted their beige sweaters.
Yeah. Now, why is it, do you think? Because this is the thing, isn't it? In fashion, that it was very beige. Why?
Yeah.
And in our homes, beige. And what is it about beige? Why are we so scared of color? Do you have a take on that?
It's safe, and it doesn't scare the horses. And people are so terrified of making a mistake that they don't allow themselves to swim in that great, wonderful pool of life enhancement. Color is life enhancing.
Oh,
I can remember times when I was so depressed and so kind of tired and beating my head against a wall, trying to get knitting going. When I've tried to get knitting going in the early days, and people would, all these companies were turning me down. They wouldn't let me design for them because I was too exotic. And I remember one company saying to me, what you have to understand, Mr. Fassett, is the English do not want to be distinctive. Like, don't create something beautiful for them and make it unusual. How dare you?
Yeah.
So that's what I was up against. And I would get tired. And then I would see a new lot of colors, or I'd find a beautiful knitting wool somewhere. And my spirits would lift, and I knew that it had a power. And so I just fought against the naysayers.
Well, you and Steve Lovey, your photographer at that time, you both did to
Yes.
your coffee book. And this is the thing, you turned a knitting book from a hey, knit this, it's quite nice, to a coffee book, to something that was a work of art. There's no two ways about it.
Well, what happened was, it was very interesting because I saw a fabulous art. I was always looking for inspiration in art books, and I found this incredible book, big volume, called The Dyer's Art, and it was to do with ikat fabrics and things. And every page was like a full page of beauty. You would open this thing and you would see this wonderful big flower that was created in ikat silk, in magenta and apple green or something. Oh, so beautiful. And so when I decided I wanted to do a book, I wanted it to look like the dyer's art. What's interesting is I now, my company that I'm doing a that book that we've just come out that we're talking about, Kaffe Fassett in the Studio, was done by Abrams. And Abrams was who did the dyer's art. And so that was very interesting to come back to that company.
Come full circle. Just fantastic. Now, the team that you work with, let's talk about the team that you work with, because it's special. It's so special. And for me, I don't know how much your upbringing has an impact on that. You were brought up in Big Sur, your family created and forged this amazing restaurant. And I quote you on this, the food really wasn't that important. I mean, it's only a restaurant. People don't really go there to eat, right? But it was the people there, and you were surrounded by the most incredible artists and actors and dance groups, and everyone that was at the height of their joy.
Yes. Yeah. Well, here it was, we were in the heart of the country, a little tiny country community living on the coast of California, very rough and rugged country. The population was 300 spread over 72 miles. So 300 people, all, individuals who were living in their castles up in the mountains, their big log cabins or whatever, so it's a very, very individual place, very tough to exist and everything else, but a stunning landscape. And my parents had the amazing tenacity and just courage to hire this amazing architect and build this absolute state-of-the-art modern building, a restaurant from a Frank Lloyd Wright student. So it was just a brilliant piece of architecture. Wonderful big concrete terraces painted pink, sort of dyed pink. And then these beautiful big, redwood structures and lots of glass and windows looking out into the trees and so on. It was just stunning. So it became a kind of place, a pilgrimage place. And a lot of people would hear about it, artists and creative people from all over the world, and they made their beat a path to our door. And so we were constantly entertaining these extraordinary minds and people who totally understood what we were doing, and amazed that we had the courage to do it in America at that time.
Do you think that gave you more of an education than school?
Oh my goodness, yes, totally. Because you saw people who would come and they would talk about how they started a little theater group in Biarritz, and or a ballet company, or sometimes we would invite, like I remember going to a Balinese dance troupe and inviting them all to come down to Nepenthe, to the restaurant, and or we would have a harpsichord concert on the terrace, or some great ballet dancer would come and do amazing dance through the whole restaurant. And, it would stop everything. Everybody would stop eating and stare at this amazing floor show. So it was impromptu, but you saw people realizing their creative lives, people saying, I have an idea, I have something I love to do in my life, and I'm going to tell the whole world about it, and I'm going to make a life out of this thing. So of course that was hugely, encouraging and educational for a young mind like mine.
So you saw that and you've emulated that. You've done all of those things yourself, and you have changed how we knit, how we quilt. You've changed that. There's no two ways about it. Your designs have changed all of that, for which many of us thank you hugely for that. You've been an amazing inspiration to so many. But the person that inspired you to come to England was a man that you met there, was a writer. And was that your first hint that actually England might be somewhere you'd quite like?
Yeah. I mean, that's Christopher Isherwood. who was, I think he was 60 years old at that point. I thought he was ancient because I was like, I don't know, 25 or 26 or something. Um, and here was this old man, but fabulous. I mean, this crisp mind and these intelligent eyes. And we just started talking about something, and one thing led to another, to another, to another. And I remember like the whole dinner party just evaporated, and he and I just ended up talking through this dinner party about everything, and life and color and imagination and love and people and everything. And so the next morning I woke up and I thought, who is that man? I mean, he was extraordinary. And they say he's an author. I've got to go and get a book of his. And I went out and I found about 4 of his books in a bookshop. I bought them all, came home, and I just sat down and I read through everything of his. And he's, he was the greatest writer in the English language at that point. He was one of the greats. And so it was just amazing to have that connection. And then it was, he was English, and a lot of his books were about England, or his English view of America, which was incredibly interesting. And then so I thought, well, I've got to go to England. I think if Christopher came out of that period with that incredible mind and that wonderful humor, I mean, he was so funny. And so, I went back to, got to England, and it was just as funny and rich and wonderful as I imagined it to be, but more so, because I realized that a 3 months vacation, which is what I planned when I came to England, wasn't going to do.
Wasn't going
I
to
was
cut
going
it.
to have to
Yeah.
stay longer and absorb this amazing place.
And you've stayed here pretty much ever since.
Yeah.
So if we're talking humor, then one of the best people in your life with humor has got to be Brandon.
Oh,
And, I adore that man,
yeah.
and he lights up a room.
Yeah.
And his fabric, I always know which ones are his.
Yeah.
The Kaffe Fassett Collective is made up, for anybody that doesn't know, is of course yourself, Brandon Mabley, and of course Philip Jacobs. So
Yeah.
Brandon's is always the quirky one.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Brandon, I just met on the street here. He was in my neighborhood, and I just got chatting to him, and he had a very bizarre way of looking at the world, and I just thought, I like his mind. So anyway, he said to me, "Where do you live?" And I said, "Well, I'm over, a few streets over." And I said, "If you just look up into the windows, you'll see some Buddhas and some bits of color." I said, "You'll know that that's my place." And so he came, and of course, he didn't just look through the window. He knocked on the door and said, "I need to see this place." And he came up and he looked around, and he just got it. It's like he's has very little formal education and no education in art at all. But he looked around and he saw exactly what I was doing with different things. He would say, "This is good, but it's not quite finished, is it?" And I was like, "How do you know that?" "Yes, you're right." And so forth. So he just had a wonderful view of what I was doing. So he had 2 jobs at that time, but he would come on his days off and just sit in the studio and absorb what was going on. And I put a pen in his hand and I said, "Start to draw and draw this." And I would make him draw great, big, complicated things. And he would, in his primitive way, he would draw. And then he learned to knit, and he learned to do needlepoint, and he started designing knitwear and designing needlepoint. And he just had this flair, this wonderful sense of fashion and everything that, after a while, I just said, "Okay, you've got to have a job here. I've got to start paying you." And so he came and took over and ran the studio for years. I mean, still runs a studio. And, we've just became the best of friends. And he, as you say, has that most hilarious sense of humor. It's totally off the wall. I will be hysterical at some film I'm watching on television, and he will sit there with a complete slit mouth. It doesn't get to him. But there are certain things that make him absolutely crack up, and he makes everybody else crack up all the time. He's very, very funny.
He is. He's a wonderful human. That's the best way. He's just a wonderful human. And it's interesting that he came with the education side, the education system, without bidding about the bush, had failed him. Dyslexia at that time was not something that was heavily recognized, certainly wasn't help. There wasn't a help there. And I think it's very easy, and was very easy at that time, to come away feeling like a failure. But he had found an artistic outlet in his cooking. And Brandon is an amazing chef. And he also has the most amazing nose. So which I think goes hand in hand with the cooking. I mean, he even said to me when he came to my studio, he was like, I can smell such and such, because I had some perfume on. And then he said, what would smell really great on you is such and such. And sure enough, I didn't, I didn't try it. I just bought a bottle, and it's my favorite. It's my favorite.
He has this innate talent of being able to shop for people, having people find the right products. He is incredibly, and it's totally instinctive with him. But
I think that's the joy.
Oh my God!
Because he hasn't had an art teacher or a lecturer that you look up to, because you've worked really hard to get into such and such an institute to study, then drum out that beautiful, basic, instinctive knowledge that he has. And that, for me, I've said this numerous times, for me, Brandon draws from the heart the things that give him joy and the things that amuse him. And that's what I see.
It is. I mean, and that's the thing, is that I'm a person who doesn't have much education. I'm completely kind of self-taught and very instinctive. And so I met my match with Brandon. I mean, he's totally that way. And also totally gets me and gets my point of what I'm doing. And sometimes he doesn't have the courage to do the things. I mean, he'll say, "Oh, I think we should be cautious here. I don't think this is going to sell, or this is going to work." And I'll say, "Nope, we're going to do it," and I'll push through. But he follows up, and he makes everything work as well as it possibly can. And also, he's more humane than I am. I mean, I'm very much concentrated on my creative work, and kind of sometimes kind of forget about the people in my life to an extent. And Brandon is brilliant at being very sensitive to people's needs and people's histories. I mean, we'll travel the world, and we'll go to a shop that we've been to once before. He will remember that the child had a medical problem, and the husband was an alcoholic, and he remembers all these things. And how are you coping with your problems? I mean, all of that just passes me by, because I'm like the absent-minded professor. I'm constantly just looking at the color of their clothes, or the yarns in their shop, or the fabrics, or whatever.
So the pair of you do make an incredible combination. And then to throw in on top of that the artwork from Philip Jacobs, who brings to the collective the most incredible. He told me off, Kay, for calling him a botanical artist. I'm not a botanical artist. It's happening. And he's right.
True. He's brilliant.
But he is brilliant. And he kind of is. But because they're not botanically correct, he's like, no, I am a fabric designer. So no, I stand corrected completely. But his florals are phenomenal. I mean,
phenomenal. And you see, he's more exacting and technical than I am. So if I have an idea that I'd like to realize, but I realize it's very, very complicated and very detailed, I'll kind of throw it to him. I'll say, you know what, you do something with wisteria. You know, I want every little petal painted. And I want you to, and he'll do it beautifully, beautifully.
Oh,
And he's also, he has a wonderful eye for seeing Oriental designs or French, you know, historical designs or early English things. And you know, going back into that history, which is what I feel like my real contribution to the world of textiles is giving people back the past, you know, going and finding the really good, beautiful, big, strong flowers and things that people used to enjoy, and bringing it back so that we can still have it.
And so Philip brings those large, bold florals that were unavailable to you when you started patchworking and quilting. But what Philip won't do is the color work on there. That's you.
That's
and
right.
he has described you as the best colorist in the world right now. Quote.
Well, that's very nice. But you know what I loved when I first started working with Philip, he said, now I'll do the artwork and I'll do it in these colors, you know, generic colors that I do everything in. But you'll do the colorways, Kaffe, because I don't really like doing that. And I went, oh, yes, this is what I can do. This is what I know how to do. You know, so I was very, very thrilled.
And you know, you really do. So the trio of you work incredibly together. But
Yeah.
you see, I mean, you say, you know, he has this Japanese history. Philip's been collecting Japanese artwork since he was 11, 12.
Yeah.
You know, he has a vast collection, and such a huge love of that genre and that era. But also he collects all of the antique fabrics as well, with these large bold prints, which when you were looking, when you first started, when Liza Lucy, let's put the blame, this is another one in the people that Kaffe has in his life that that are fabulous.
Yeah.
And Liza Lucy is one of them. Now, she was a knitwear rep. She'd just bought 6 copies of your book when Rowan rang her up and said, do you want to, you know, do you want to be a knitwear rep? Not really. We've got this guy, Kaffe Fassett. Yep.
Yeah.
And then when she'd bought the books at wholesale, right?
Yeah. That morning she had bought 6 copies of my book. Yeah.
So that was the stinger for her. And she is also the one that has coined the phrase, you have a safe asset with Kaffe Fassett, because otherwise you're calf all over the place.
That's right. Yeah. Kaffe Fassett.
So, yeah. So I love this woman for many things, but the one thing I really love her for is that she kept sending you little bits of patchwork. And
see, there's that American pushiness, you know, that she and I both have. But you know, she like I was saying, oh, I don't really have time to get into the whole new thing of patchwork, you know.
So you thought that you were saying no, and she was saying,
yeah, that's right.
Maybe.
She was hearing maybe, and so you know, she would take all my knitting patterns and create them in patchwork and send me a block saying, you know, you knitted this once, but look at what it is like as a patchwork. And then I would start correcting it, saying, you know, I don't like the white you used in that, and so forth and so forth. And then she'd say, you're designing. And so I gave in and I started making patchwork. And boy, what a fabulous world she got me into, you know, because we've never looked back.
And you are so correct when you say, because a lot of your inspiration comes from past quilts, antique quilts, and that's where you needed to find these large prints that we just didn't have as quilters. We didn't have them; they weren't out there, and these large scale prints. So for that, we are incredibly grateful for you, because you bring us all of these. But they're amazing for bag making as well as quilting. They are, and dressmaking and everything else. They've just brought color and life and beauty into what was otherwise a very small print world. So really, really grateful for that. and so you've worked with her for many years, but also, you know, you can't stitch and knit everything yourself. So you started off with a lady up in Yorkshire, because obviously going back and forth to the States wasn't always going to be tenable. Like you can't keep going over there. So you ended up with a lady up in Yorkshire, and she, well, tell us about it first of all.
Well, her name was Pauline, and
Yeah.
she had, you know, she would sometimes arrive in my studio, and I would say, I've got an idea, and she would start throwing fabric around and cutting it up and showing me how to make this concept I had. And so I thought, you know, we should work together, and we should, you know, work on a book together. And so we started working, and she was brilliant because she coordinated the whole book. She figured out where the patterns would go, you know, did all the patterns, and then got a pattern checker to come in and work. But she would sew everything, and she and I, we would have these intense periods of just going up and making maybe 15 quilts at over 5 days or something in her studio. It's just absolutely brilliant. And then she would put the whole magazine together, you know, the quilting and patchwork magazines that we do every year. But eventually she got asthma, and it's cutting the fabric, the little fibers were just very dangerous for her. So she had to stop. And that was a big blow.
Twist, isn't it? A real cruel twist of fate for her there.
Yeah, very cruel twist of fate.
But she's still in your life, and you share a love of books with her, and
yeah. Oh yeah, and puzzles. You know,
puzzles.
She just sent me the most wonderful jigsaw puzzles to do. This wonderful painting that I just sat down in 2 days. I did this puzzle. I was so happy. I love doing puzzles.
Yes, and but when you do, like when I do a puzzle, I mean it's generally something with the kids, because they adore puzzles. And for me, it's, you know, oh, is this the face of a teddy bear? Does that go there? Is this the ear of a rabbit? Let's put that there. But you take it to a whole new level. And when you have a jigsaw that is, say, based on a piece of art, this was what got me. It's not that you are just making the jigsaw, you take it a step further and you use it to find a greater knowledge and depth of that artist, how those brush strokes went.
I'm telling you, if I had an art school, I would make every painter sit down and do a classical old painting or a modern painting, whatever, as a jigsaw, because you start to look at the brushwork. You know, you're looking at every intense little detail, and you're piecing it together, and you see how, you know, a jaw was painted, or an eye was painted, or hair was painted. You're looking at every brushstroke. It's the most extraordinary way of getting deeply into the artistic vision of an artist.
No, it's phenomenal. I hadn't ever thought of it like that. I mean, I spent quite a long time wanting to go into art restoration, and it is about getting that detail and trying to replicate. So no, that was, I was really fascinated by that. So if we go back to your home, because this is what the book is fundamentally about, but those people that make your home and make everything around it. Oh, hang on, but we should say, yes, you're not working with Pauline now, but you do have now a lady in Bristol who has kind of taken over the reins of that. We need to give that credit there as well.
Janet Haig, and she's got a group of quilters, these two brilliant quilters that work with her now, they do the entire book. And it's fabulous, because if I've left something out, or I have a kind of half-baked idea, Janet will just run it up, and then she will send me pictures of it and say, do you really mean this? And I'll say, well, not quite. Now that you've done that, now that you've put it together, I can see that I need to change something. And so you need those kind of creative people who spot where something is not going well, or when it's going brilliantly.
And you have that in Brandon as well. I mean, when you work in your studio, sometimes he's working in the kitchen, sometimes he's working alongside you. Whilst you do the color work for Philip, you don't do the color work for Brandon. Like he does his own, doesn't he?
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. But it all marries up beautifully. I think, I mean, the book gives a great insight into the processes, and I knew that you had color palettes. I think I hadn't quite got to the point that they were not regimented, but they were always there. There's always a blue, there's always a red, there's always a pastel, there's always the and it makes perfect sense. And is that so? Because your prints don't go out of print. There's the Kaffe Fassett Collective Classics.
That's right.
And I think a lot of those arrive on my doorstep very soon. I've just had notification, which I'm very excited for, because not only have I now got your new collection, but I've got the past stuff. But because of those color palettes, they all still work together.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
Yeah, and it's very interesting. I'm constantly flabbergasted at, because I'm doing a book now where I'm going back and using a lot of past fabrics, things that are out of the running now as commercially, but I'm just going back into my archive and pulling things out and just making quilts with older things, and it's just fantastic how well they go together and still harmonize. But I always say, I'm trying to make a box of paints for people and a box of possibilities, so that with the delicate little pastel watercolor ladies, they can do something very delicate, very, very quiet, and very English, or they can be very Russian or Chinese and hit it with the strong, powerful, saturated colors.
It's just fantastic. So there is one room in your home that doesn't have a whole heap of color in, and that's Brandon's domain. And he's actually got some of your earlier works in there on the wall, where you went through a sort of white on white and tonal stage, and it's a beautiful room which opens out onto the garden. And what struck me was you've got the dining room, which brings nature from the outside in. And then you've got Brandon's peaceful, restful, neutral area that then opens out onto this wonderful terrace and then back garden.
Yeah.
But the terrace means that you take the indoors out.
Yeah. Because all the mosaic up the wall and across the floor is very colorful. It's like suddenly a patchwork quilt.
Yeah.
There on the wall.
The worlds collide. It's really beautiful. And you even have a succulent roof on your garden shed.
Yeah.
Love that. Is that a nod to Big Sur, to life in Big Sur?
Perhaps, yeah. Because certainly succulent gardens are a big thing in California.
Yeah.
And so, I always loved them when I was growing up, these kind of prehistoric plants, beautiful plant. I love succulents.
And so is Brandon's domain, is that an area that you venture into much, or do you just go
particularly when there's a nice summer day, because that back terrace catches the heat, the sun. It's like a sun trap, and so we go and sit there, particularly last spring, when we could bring out our deck chairs and sit in the sun. Wasn't it amazing, the warmth of the sun, which came to heal us, when we were all feeling desperately frightened about being ill. And we would see the sun and become whole and healed.
And we were told to go outside, and the weather for once allowed it, which was really fabulous. Bathrooms in your home have also had the Fassett Mabley makeover.
Yeah,
it is fair to say. And in both bathrooms, Brandon's is again, he takes this cream theme through, but the mosaics are exquisite.
Yeah.
Now I have to ask, I know that you source a lot of the porcelain and the pottery from car boots and places like that. Do you have it all mapped out? And then is it a matter of quick, the renders on, shove them in quick? Or how much leeway is there to find the perfect place for a perfect piece of pottery?
I would say that it like everything else in my life, it's very, very instinctive and impromptu. I would just get a ton of china around me, and my cutters, wonderful little tile cutters, and so what happens was that I would find, like a colorful flower on a plate that was white, or a teacup or something, and I would cut away all the white. So I had tons and tons of shards of white. And so when it came time to build up Brandon's bathroom in his very neutral domain, we put a white, all those white bits became the mosaic for his bathroom.
Yeah, no, it's
My bathroom upstairs became richly colored, like kind of, it's kind of like Byzantine tiles or something. They're just brilliant.
well, your
Rupert Spira.
tiles are, yeah, they are. They're Rupert Spira, but they're his mistakes.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, which
I
you
mean,
find more beautiful.
I found it. This, he was a friend of mine. We did the Dervish turning together, and then he became a potter. And I went down to visit his pottery, and here behind his barn was this great pile of tiles that, to me, were gorgeous, but to him they were all mistakes. They were where the glazes had gone wrong. You want a pink glaze, but suddenly green came into it, which to me made it fabulous. And so those were half price. And I just came down with a huge boxes and just filled them with tiles and bought all these things at half price. Came back and did this bathroom with all of these kind of slightly off tiles, which to me are just stunning. And then I got him to make me a beautiful basin out of a fruit bowl, a big punch bowl that he would make, but in stripes of red and green. And
Oh, it's stunning.
Beautiful glazed sink, which I just love. And the whole thing has come together very well.
And then you have artwork in there. You've got beautiful artwork by your niece in there as well.
That's right.
And
And
that's another date in the diary, isn't it? A week that you spend painting with Erin.
That's right.
And then last year you brought out, was it? Yeah, it was last year you brought out your book together, painting, because
Yes.
you'd paint the same thing, but in your very different styles. Really
Yeah.
beautiful. Really
Yeah.
beautiful. And you say that your bathroom is, whilst the rest of the home goes through flux with exhibitions, things for this, thing for that, your bathroom is your most thought through and put together room.
That's right.
So is that your place of relaxation?
Yes, it is. If I mean, I'm very careful because I have a very big bathtub. So I'm very careful with water these days. Because water is a very precious resource. So I don't want to squander it. But occasionally I give myself a fabulous bubble bath. And I come into that bathroom and I sit there and I look at the tiles and the colors of the wall and the paintings and the plants. There's a lot of plants. And so it's a sanctuary, and it's made to heal you, that there's color healing as well as everything else, and then you have a nice, relaxing, warm bath. It's just lovely.
It's your own spa when you can't get to,
My spa. Exactly.
when you can't get to Mexico. That's the next best thing.
Exactly.
And then the studio. Okay, so this was my other question. Okay. Artists obviously being afraid to make mistakes. Could you talk me through the Kermit Green kitchen, please? And how have you lived with it being green?
I know. Well, I just got it in my head. I love green. I love green gardens and green hillsides and so forth. So I'm going to paint my room, my kitchen green. Well, I picked Kermit Frog green. And for those people who don't know what that is, it's like a Granny Smith apple, but intensified, deep. And it was bilious. I mean, you would just go in there and you just want to, it was just awful. And so eventually I painted a nice soft yellow, sort of primrose yellow.
Is well, so many people in England go for magnolia, and they can call it all sorts of different things. They dress it up as apple blossom white and all
Yes.
these other. It's magnolia. It's just magnolia. Is
Yeah.
your magnolia yellow? Because it does feature in quite a lot of the rooms on the walls.
Yes, I mean this room is painted a soft yellow too. It's the same sort of yellow. It's
The
just
roses.
it's not magnolia for sure. It's more of a primrose yellow.
Yeah,
lovely little primrose flowers that come out in the spring.
Yeah, but instead of having magnolia on every wall, it's kind of like yellow. That primrose yellow is sort of your.
Yes, and yeah, my living room downstairs is a deeper yellow. It's a more committed yellow, and then I paint big roses on top of that. Yeah.
And was that because you had someone coming to visit?
That's right. Yes, I had beige colored walls. I had sort of old parchment kind of look, and then I had the roses on top of that. And I thought, it's a little bit sad and less colorful. And then these Japanese guys were coming from the big department store where I had an exhibition in Japan, and they were coming to visit me. And so I thought, quickly, I'll paint. And so I just took about 3 or 4 different shades of yellow, and I just painted very quickly and badly around these roses, and I love the effect.
It's beautiful. And actually, that ended up being a wallpaper design, didn't it? For the design.
That's right. Trisha Guilds came and looked at it, and she said, "I want this as a furnishing fabric and a wallpaper," and so they did it.
And then your cupboards, your beautiful cupboards. Which matched my trousers when I came to see you, completely unintentionally.
Well, those cupboards were just big white cupboards, and for a long time, Brandon and I would sit in that room, and we had this big like white fridge at the end of the room. It was just, and Brandon kept saying, "You got to paint something on those doors because they're just awful being white." And so eventually, I just went down and I painted these big blue and white pots and kind of Indian look on the walls. Yeah.
And they hide your quilt collections.
That's right.
It's just the most beautiful thing. Now, talking of collections, you do have a huge collection of Buddhas. And in your book, you say it's because it reminds you of your mother. They've got children climbing all over her. And I mistook that to mean because your mum had 5 children. I was like, well, she must have always had kids climbing all over her. But that wasn't actually what you meant.
No, because this was an old Buddhist monk, who used to go out into the neighborhood with a great big sack full of toys and things for children. And he's always there with his sack as this Buddha, and he's kind of a big rotund figure, very generous body and a great big head, bald head, and then these little children on him. For some reason, that symbol is just so delightful to me. There's the patterns that the children are wearing and the pattern that's around his robe and on his sack and so forth. So I was just, I collect those wherever I find them, and I find them all over the world. When we went to Vietnam, we found amazing ones in Vietnam, and sometimes in American antique shops, I'll find them and so forth. So
do you remember, I mean, because you do have a vast pottery collection and they are beautifully put in color order on your shelves. I know when I shared a photo of it, the number of women that went, I would hate to dust that. That's a whole other story. We're not going to let that get in the way of a pottery collection. Do you remember where you picked up every single piece?
Probably not anymore. But there was a period where I was very aware, what little, you know, car boot sale or some little funny antique shop I would find in the world, because I would always come back from my travels with things in my suitcase, small bits of china and tiles and things, that was always part of the booty of travel.
And it's been realistically since the 1990s, since you met Brandon and Brandon took over the running of the studio, that has allowed you both to travel. It started off with Australia, but you've America, Europe, just all over, and that's allowed you to then bring all of these things back.
Yeah.
Is it fair to say, is Brandon the homemaker in terms of, you collect these things? Who arranges them? How, like, Brandon was the first person to get you.
I would say that he is a homemaker. He's a Cancer, and I'm Sagittarian, which means that my mind is anywhere but organized. I'm not a details man, and Brandon is more of a details person, and he's also somebody who likes family order. He likes the idea of a carpet on the floor. Well, I would buy carpets and I'd roll them up and put them in the closet, and bring them out occasionally and throw them over a table or something as decoration. It never occurred to me to actually put it on the floor like where it was meant to be. And so Brandon, we have to have a carpet on the floor, and we have to have a sofa. I said, oh, these old chairs will do, So he made a kind of order in the studio that was just brilliant. And he brings that civilization to it all.
He does, and he's now helped by Bundle, who firstly has the most fantastic name, and she's Australian, isn't she?
Well, she's English, but she was in Australia.
Okay.
And she was very settled in Australia when we found her. And we were saying to her boss at that time, she was working for a shop, and we were saying to her boss, we need somebody to work in our studio. And she said to us, you need a Bundle. And we said, yes, but she's living here. She's not going to come. And then it turned out that she had family in England that she wanted to come back and visit with. And so she gave up her time in Australia and moved here. And she's been brilliant at working out patterns and helping me design and doing all of the travel documents and the workshop details and all that stuff that we get involved with.
You find the right people. This is what I see in your life, is that you find the right people. When you're open to it, you find the right people will absolutely present themselves, much like Debbie Patterson, who's done the photography for the book, which is stunning as ever with her work. You worked with Steve Lovey for 30 years. And when he decided to go back to the States, that left a gap.
Yeah.
Big boots.
And then I interviewed all these different photographers, and I could tell that they just wouldn't understand my love of color. That wasn't interesting to them. They were like people that were very too detailed for me. I needed somebody who was going to have a kind of a colorful eye. Anyway, I opened her portfolio, and she doesn't even remember this picture, but I remember, I can see it as clearly now. At the edge of a field of lavender, there was a little tray, and on that tray was a blue chipped enamel teapot against this lavender. And then there was a little sack of garlic in a lavender sack, like what you're wearing, the color you're wearing, a little mesh lavender sack with garlic in it. And then this little blue teapot, and then the lavender flowers in the field. I said, who's this person? This is it. This is who I want. And she came to work for me, and we have gone through book after book after book, and we work at a great pace. And we've just finished a book that we did in Lavenham, that wonderful town in England, the beautiful old half timbered structures, and wonky and fabulous and full of color. And we just had a ball. And it's one of the most elegant books I've ever done. I'm really, really happy with it. And that's going to come out soon.
I'm very excited for that.
We're talking about the studio book, so I shouldn't get too distracted with that.
But it's so lovely to have your studio depicted in glorious color. That is, and it's,
didn't they do a beautiful job laying it out?
Yeah.
Don't you feel you're there? Like in the painting studio, the palettes and the visceralness of it. I thought when I did this, it was almost too easy to do, because Debbie and I know this house so well because we've done room sets and we've done all sorts of shots here. And when she went through and did her photographs, we were both thinking, oh, is this going to be that special? Because we know it so well. Well,
but
when
to the rest of the world, we're aching to see it.
I know. And when I opened the book, I saw what you guys see. Something. My God, this place is amazing. Brandon said, I can't believe I live here. Because we were so shocked at what it actually came out like on the page, that it came out so much, the texture and the reality of this place, but framed in these beautiful, the layout, I think, of the book is just exquisite.
Do you think sometimes it helps to see your life through someone else's eyes? Because that's effectively, as soon as you employ a photographer to do that, that's exactly what it is. It's their take on your vision.
And let me tell you something, for a control freak like me, it is very difficult to trust somebody else to make a picture of my life and present it. But when I do, I'm always, like very often we'll have, not very often, but occasionally we'll have a contest where I'll say, here's the latest fabrics that I've designed. Let's see what quilts you can make out of this. Well, the ideas that come in are so fresh, and so the quilters of this world are so brilliant at putting together what I've designed that I can't believe it. I'm just in awe of other people's creativity.
Yeah, but it's like it's cooking, isn't it? If you have great ingredients, what you produce is going to be fabulous. And that's what you give us. You give us great ingredients. There's just no two ways about that.
I'm very grateful to people like you and the other people in my life who understand what I'm doing, because it's not a given. There's a lot of people who look at what I'm doing and they're completely flummoxed. They can't, they just think it's chaotic and crazy, And for people who see the beauty in what I'm doing and take it and make their own thing out of it, I'm so grateful for that. I can't tell you.
I from the receiving point, it's a gratitude for having someone with your vision and your love of color. And from a personal perspective, you and Brandon have been incredibly gracious and generous with your time and your knowledge for me. And you have taught me, I know it's a tip of the iceberg, but you've taught me so much. And, Brandon will happily give up time on a Sunday afternoon if I'm struggling to put some colors together for a show. He will happily, FaceTime with me and go, oh, but have you thought about this? And go through my fabrics and my fabric choices. And that was never anything that I expected or even hoped for. The very first time that I met you, I was terrified. Because it was Kaffe Fassett, like, oh my goodness. And it was, we had 5 minutes to meet before we went to air and spent 2 hours talking together. It could have been disastrous.
Yeah.
What if we'd run out of things to talk about?
Which we now know we're never going to do.
No, not ever.
No, well, because you just, I was sitting there thinking, okay, we were having another interview. All right. And then I thought, wait a minute. These questions are so perceptive. well, it just staggers me what you remember. I mean, you look through my books and you remember all this stuff and these details because it interests you. I mean, that's the thing, is that when you're interested in something, you register it, don't
Yeah,
you?
yeah. And
Yeah.
what you say in them resonates for me. And I'm like, yes, that is absolutely it. You have vocalized everything that I felt and thought and never known how to say. And you've given me a confidence with color that I didn't know that I had. But it's so funny because when I sit and I talk to you, I have so many things going through my head when you're saying about this Buddha who gives to children, and I'm thinking, but that's Brandon. He goes with you to India and comes back with a car full of balloons
That's
for
right.
the children.
That's
Like you have
exactly.
your own Buddha. He's
Yeah,
there in your
yeah,
life,
yeah.
and you thought you
And
collected.
he's equally good with older people. Like he would find all of the kind of old people who were nervous in the studio or in our workshops and say to them, I'm going to be your friend. And then he would help them to flourish.
Yeah.
People always flourish under his guidance, his eye, which is always brilliant.
It's a dream team for sure, an absolute dream team. And I could happily talk to you for hours about all of this, and I know I've got notes and notes and notes here, and I will kick myself for not having discussed X, Y, and Z with you the minute that we come off air. And I'm just so grateful to you
Well, it's
for.
not the last time we're going to meet, darling.
Oh no, it's not, because
We're
you've
going to
got
have
another book and we're going to
we're
talk
going to have
about that.
fabulous times. Yeah, exactly. We're going to dance a tango
We are.
around the world.
Can we not do the whirling dervish thing though? Because that I think I'll get dizzy.
Oh no, yeah, and I couldn't do it anymore. Oh, that was exhausting.
Very, very quickly then, just to put that into perspective, you learned to be a whirling dervish, which is a kind of a form of meditation, but in dance form is
Yeah,
the best way I can
yeah,
describe it.
yeah.
And actually through that, you've met the guy that's given you your sanctuary of your bathroom, because you met Rupert through it.
That's right.
You also met Philip through it as
Philip
well.
Jacobs. Yes, absolutely.
Maybe
Yeah.
there's something in this whirling dervish malarkey. Maybe I should go and have a spin.
Well, to go and watch it sometime is quite beautiful, quite wonderful. I remember this Islamic woman. She must have been Egyptian, I think. She came to watch us one day and she just sat on a chair, and she must have been about 70 and beautifully dressed and beautifully coiffured. And she sat there and she just wept from the beginning to the end. And as I was turning, I kept looking at her and I thought, what we're doing and the music and everything else is moving you so much that you're moving me. You're making me understand that what we're doing is something very special. And it is. I mean, it's a prayer. It's
Yeah.
it's an active prayer.
Mhm. It's funny
And it's
because
very special. And I suddenly, when you're talking about it, it's making me miss it. But it was the hardest work I've ever done in my life to keep your arms up,
yeah,
for 45 minutes going around this whole ceremony was very, very hard work.
it's phenomenal. I mean, you described Philip Jacobs as a man that looks more like a rugby player or a builder than a.
Yes, yes.
Maybe it's the dervishing. Maybe it's that whirling that's given him that great upper body.
Well,
Um,
and collecting dinosaur bones,
well, he does that as well, dragging dinosaurs off the Jurassic coast. That's another pastime. But
Yeah.
really, to close, one of the last things that you write in your book is about painting and about how discipline scares you. And yet, talking to you, you are one of the most disciplined people I've ever come across. The whirling dervish takes massive discipline. To swim
Yeah.
every day takes discipline. To
And
paint.
finishing projects,
Do.
if you start designing, you don't finish it. And this is what I've learned from my teachers in life, Natasha, that these wonderful artists and these incredible minds that I've met who taught me, stick to it. If you start something, go ahead and finish it. It doesn't matter if halfway through it you realize it's a disaster, it's not going to work, it's a failure. Finish it and then have a judgment. But by finishing it, you will learn something that is invaluable. And that's more than making money from selling something or anything else. We need to learn. And a little bit of suffering, which comes with doing something that's very hard work and that you want to break away from and you want to run away from, by sticking to it and putting in that energy, you learn something very deep.
And that, do you know what that is? That is a philosophy I hope to pass on to my children, and it's true. Yeah. It's just so true. Oh, okay. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, darling. How lovely to have your mind looking at my world.
Oh, it's an absolute pleasure. Anytime. And let's talk again when Lavenham comes to fruition.
Yes. English Village quilts. We'll do that.
Perfect. All right. I can't wait. You take care. Lots of love to Brandon.
Okay. Bye-bye, darling.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Yeah.